I woke to a silence that felt staged. Not the soft kind after snow, when the city holds its breath and you can almost hear flakes settling on rooftops. This was a taut, watchful quiet, the sort that makes the skin on your arms rise because you sense that something has already happened and you were the last to know. Light leaked through the curtains in a thin winter stripe. I lay still and listened. The boiler hummed in the cupboard, the faraway rumble of a bus drifted up from Old Brompton Road, and somewhere below a door clicked shut, followed by footsteps fading along the corridor. Nothing from the kitchen. No kettle. No spoon against porcelain. No mother singing off-key because she believed it charmed the tea to taste better. I slid my feet to the rug and stood. The floor was colder than usual, as if the apartment had decided overnight to become a museum. In the living room, the tree lights were off, their tiny bulbs dull like a constellation that had gone out. Tinsel drooped, a ribbon had come loose and fallen onto the rug, and on the sofa, a red scarf lay coiled like something that had shed its skin and fled. On the dining table, a half-eaten croissant sat on a plate beside a lipstick-marked mug. The mug was still faintly warm. A napkin had been folded with one corner tucked in, the way my mother does when she leaves in a hurry but wants to pretend she did not. The scent of cinnamon and orange peel hung in the air. It felt like walking into the last exhale of a party. I went to the hallway. The row of suitcases that had lined the wall last night was gone. The hook by the door was empty. No car keys. No wool coat in my father's rueful beige. The umbrella stand blinked like a missing tooth. I said mum without meaning to, and the flat gave me back my own voice in a thinner version. I checked the guest bedroom. Bed flat, no dent in the pillows. The wardrobe door ajar, hangers clacking gently when I touched them as if to make sure my fingers were still part of me. In the bathroom, a smear of shaving foam circled the drain like a question mark. Today, the thought arrived with the little shock of a dropped glass. Today was the day. The Douglas family Christmas. Austria. Snow that looked like postcards. A chalet with a balcony that faced a line of firs and a village clock that chimed on the hour. I could see the itinerary on the kitchen island from where I stood, printed on thick paper in the colors I always use for trips. Blue for travel, green for accommodation, amber for meals, purple for medical notes and allergies because Amelia insists her life is too important to be ended by a rogue peanut. I picked up my phone. The screen came to life, and with it came them. A story at the top. A rectangle that radiated warmth like a small sun. I tapped it. They stood under the glass roof at Heathrow. Dad with his scarf tied in a complicated loop he would later pretend was Parisian when it was really just confusion. Mum wearing the red scarf that had been on the sofa last night. Amelia in a cream coat, holding up a paper cup with her nails the color of frost. Jamie with his hood up and his grin as careless as a coin toss. The cousins wedged in around them. Even Aunt Sylvie, who always said airports made her feel like a sock in a tumbled dryer. The caption slid across the bottom of the frame with slow cheerfulness. Douglas family Christmas begins. A line of little trees and a plain emoji went waltzing by. I counted faces the way one counts beads to keep from breaking. 14. I counted again because I wanted the universe to be embarrassed by its arithmetic. 14. It did not change. A small heat rose behind my eyes and then settled somewhere behind my ribs. I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring and sounded as if she were trying to pour sunshine into the phone. Darling, you are up. We thought you were with Jamie. I looked at the empty hook by the door. I am at home, Mum. The flat is empty. I heard the sound of her hand covering the speaker, the rustle of fabric, the noise of someone asking a question beside her. When she returned, her voice had been smoothed like a tablecloth. There must have been a mix-up. We were in a rush. Everyone thought you were riding with Amelia. It was chaotic, you know how it is. Take a later flight, love, we will collect you. Do not be upset. The word upset landed like a clumsy pat on the shoulder. I imagined her looking at the camera after hanging up, continuing the smile for everyone else. I pressed end and set the phone down on the island next to the blue section of the itinerary where the flight times were printed in a neat column. The deposit figure stared up at me as if it too were waiting for context. £10,400, paid from my card. There was a pencil ticked beside each item the way I tick things when people tell me they are too busy to read but want to be reassured that someone has. I told myself there had been a mistake. I told myself that families are messy and airports are worse. I told myself anything that would sit still long enough to be believed. Then another notification pinged. Amelia again. This time a boomerang. Snow falling outside a window, a blur of lights from a minibus pulling away from the curb, her face leaning into the frame to kiss the camera. 15 hearts, one family, someone had typed over the video. The quiet pressed in until even the humming boiler sounded like an accusation. I went to the sink and ran the tap, not because I needed water, but because I needed noise. The glass filled slowly. The water line rose and rose and rose until it was a convex edge, and I stopped just before it spilled. The way I had stopped just before anger so many times that the act felt like a discipline. My hand shook, made a single ring on the countertop, and then was still. I took the itinerary and turned it over. The back was blank and very white. I stood with the pen in my hand and waited. A long time ago, a teacher had told me that if I could not find words, I should move my body until breath returned. I walked to the window and looked down at the street where a man in a parka tugged a dog who had decided that this particular square of London pavement was a place to be devout about. A cyclist clipped past a taxi and raised a hand without malice. A woman pushed a pram with a clear plastic hood. The city kept going. I sat at the table and wrote one line to keep my mind from fraying. They did not forget me. They chose to leave me. The sentence looked wrong on the page, and yet it fit inside my spine with a click that was almost relief. It aligned every year I had spent translating chaos into calendars, every dinner I had made to hold a quarrel together, every sorry I had said to prevent someone else from attending the apology they owed. I remembered the first time I bought the family tickets with my card. It had been a small thing then. A spring weekend by the sea because Dad's face had gone tired around the eyes, and Mum had started humming in the middle of the night for no reason she could name. I booked everything, put the receipts in a folder, sent a tidy email that made the trip seem as if it had organized itself. No one paid me back, not exactly, but they thanked me with kisses at the door and with messages that said you are a wonder. I did not notice that wonder had an accounting column until later. I remembered the time Amelia cried into my lap because her life was too heavy and her work too large and her fiancé too thoughtless. I moved meetings, cooked soup, made lists, drove her to appointments she did not want to keep and did not want to cancel. Later, during her birthday dinner, she thanked the room for holding her. She named everyone except me because apparently I was furniture. I remembered Jamie's summer when everything he touched turned to noise. I helped him through the worst of it, and then watched as he made a joke about me being the family's unpaid chief of staff. He said it with a grin because he believed jokes were small and consequence-free. I laughed because I wanted the evening to survive. I looked at the mug on the table and traced the lip mark and wondered which part of last night had made my mother leave it behind. Did she set it down and tell herself she would fetch it on the way out? Did she hover by my bedroom door and think better of it? Did anyone say my name out loud as they closed the door? I imagined someone saying we should wake Zara and someone else saying she will make everything complicated. I could hear the way they would make complicated mean inconvenient and the way they would make peace mean my silence. My phone vibrated again with a persistence that felt like a mosquito. I swiped without looking and declined the call. The flat resumed its watch. In the stillness, I noticed the small ache in my chest had become something steadier, like the sensation of a hand closing around a doorknob and finding it warm. I carried my laptop to the desk by the window. The desk used to belong to my grandmother. Its surface is scratched where a younger version of me once traced shapes with the tip of a key while listening to the grown-ups make plans. The drawers smell faintly of lemon oil and old paper. I opened the lid and the machine woke with a clean chime that sounded almost kind. The home screen bloomed into life. Emails arranged themselves into a tidy column, each subject like a flag waved politely from a small nation that needed something. The reservation confirmation sat near the top with its mathematics and its clear promises. I did not open it. Not yet. Instead, I clicked the small icon that means the cloud knows more about your life than you can carry in your hands. A box appeared. Syncing. A line moved across the screen like a tide creeping up a beach. It was dull, practical progress. I watched it the way one watches someone sleep after a long illness, waiting for the next breath. Another thought drifted in, slow, as if afraid of what it would have to do once it was fully formed. I saw myself at the airport later today, suitcase in hand, taking a flight to meet them. I saw us at the chalet, the smiles forced as if our faces were borrowed. I saw the way I would fold myself into the smallest possible piece to fit inside the idea of family they proudly posted about. The image made my scalp throb. My skin pulled tight over my shoulders, as if my body wanted to be larger and finally occupy the space with my own name on it. The progress bar reached the end, and the folder tree opened like a mechanical flower. I leaned forward. For a second, my reflection floated over the screen, my hair unbrushed, the soft line at the corner of my mouth that appears when I am trying not to be angry. The folders arranged themselves alphabetically, and the new one did not pretend to be discreet. It sat there with the smugness of a sign hung on a door. Douglas Trip 2024. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I did not open it. Not yet. I let my breath out slowly until the fog on the glass began to fade and the winter morning sharpened around the edges again. I could hear the neighbor's radio, a small, cheerful voice speaking about traffic that had no interest in my life. For the first time that morning, the quiet did not feel like a room that had been emptied. It felt like a room waiting for me to decide what it would hold. I closed the laptop halfway and looked at the apartment. The tree. The mugs. The itinerary with its colored columns that had once felt like an act of love and now looked like a ledger. I went to the bedroom and took my suitcase from the wardrobe. The zip rasped open in a sound that always makes me think of a curtain being pulled back before a scene. I laid shirts on the bed, sweaters that still smelled faintly of cedar, the black dress I wear when I need to remember that a spine is a beautiful thing. On the dresser was the bracelet I bought last spring from a market in Kyoto, a string of dark wooden beads that had warmed to my skin over the days I walked through temple gardens and learned how to do nothing without apology. I turned it in my fingers and felt something in me tilt toward a decision that did not require permission. When I returned to the desk, I opened the laptop again. The folder was still there, patient and plain and obscene. I clicked it. The window opened like a mouth. A list of files waited, each with previews that felt like fingerprints left in wet paint. My heartbeat moved to my throat. I reached for my tea and found the cup empty. Somewhere in the building, a lift creaked. Outside, the bare branches scratched the window with a sound like a pencil searching for the right word. I let the cursor hover above the first message until the tooltip appeared with its neat timestamp and its little promise of revelation. I did not know yet what it would say. I knew only that the air in the room had changed, and with it, the shape of my life. I placed both palms on the desk. My fingers left faint ovals of heat on the wood. I clicked. The message opened into a thread of blue bubbles that scrolled downward like a slow confession. At first the words blurred together, a wall of polite sentences that looked harmless until you realized what they meant when placed side by side. Jamie, we leave at 6:30. She'll sleep in. Amelia, are you sure? She booked the cars. Jamie, exactly. Everything's set, we just have to go. Mum, it's for the best. We all need a calm Christmas. My stomach folded in on itself. The next message arrived like a nail in the wood. Dad, Zara means well, but she's exhausting. Let's enjoy a few days without her lists. For a long while, I didn't blink. My body knew what the words meant before my mind did. There it was, spelled in the casual rhythm of people who have already agreed to something unkind. They had coordinated to leave me behind. The screen glowed against my skin. My reflection floated faintly in the glass, the same face that had driven each of them to airports, birthdays, weddings. The same hands that wrote checks, filled tax forms, packed medical kits for their children. They were talking about me as if I were a piece of luggage too heavy to carry this year. A laugh escaped before I could stop it, a single, sharp sound that startled the room. I pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth until the laugh turned into something quieter. The last message was from Jamie again. Don't worry, she'll forgive us, she always does. That sentence lodged somewhere deep. I read it 3 times. The first for shock, the second for pain, and the third for clarity. He believed it. They all did. The idea of me forgiving had become a law of nature they no longer needed to check. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The plaster had a small crack running from the corner to the center, something I'd been meaning to repair for months. Suddenly it looked like a map, one long line dividing before and after. The next hour passed in small movements. I washed the mug, folded the napkin, straightened the chair that had been slightly turned. The simple act of tidying felt like translation. This cup means I was here. This floor means I am still standing. Then I sat again, opened the booking site, and logged in. The reservation glimmered at the top of the screen, 6 rooms under my name, the total in bold beside the snowflake logo. The cursor hovered over the words "cancel reservation." My finger didn't tremble. I called the hotel. A woman answered, polite and distant in the way professionals sound before they know your story. Good morning, this is Zara Douglas. I need to cancel a group booking for the Douglas family. Check in tomorrow. Her tone shifted. I'm afraid there are no refunds within 72 hours. That's fine. I'm not asking for one. I just don't want anyone using it. She hesitated. May I ask why MS Douglas? Because I paid for something that excluded me. The silence on the line was brief but full. I could hear typing, a small click, then her voice softened. Understood. I'll forward this to my supervisor for confirmation. It may take a few minutes. Take your time, I said and meant it. When the call ended, I looked out at the street again. A bus passed, its windows fogged with breath, people inside wrapped in coats and chatter. Life moved as if mine hadn't cracked open. I walked to my wardrobe and pulled out a suitcase, the same one that had traveled to family holidays every year since I was 19. It smelled faintly of cedar and airport air. I laid it on the bed and opened the zip. Filling it was strangely easy. 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, my passport. The wooden bracelet from Kyoto, the book of poems I kept meaning to finish. When I came back to the desk, the supervisor was already on the line. His voice was calm, almost kind. MS Douglas, we've processed your cancellation. The refund will go back to your card within 5 business days. The reservation is void. I hope you find a more peaceful holiday. I already have, I said. After the call, I didn't cry. The idea of tears felt too small for what had shifted inside me. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and typed Kyoto Meditation Retreat January. The search results bloomed with images of bamboo forests, low wooden cabins, and rain on stone paths. There it was. The Rebirth Silence Retreat. 1 week. No phones, no internet, just dawn bells and breath. The cost matched almost exactly what the family owed me. It felt like balance. I clicked book now. Confirmation arrived in a clean white email, its lines so crisp they felt like new air. Departure, 28 December 21:20, London Heathrow to Osaka Kansai, connecting to Kyoto by train. I turned off the computer and sat still, listening to the room breathe around me. The same space that had started the day as a witness to betrayal now felt wider, almost lighter. Before bed, I wrote a short note and left it on the kitchen counter, pinned under the mug I had washed. Do not call me if the only time you remember me is when you need something. Then I went to pack the small things that still tethered me. Toothbrush, charger, headphones, my grandmother's old fountain pen. At midnight, the snow began to fall again, fine as dust. I watched it gather on the windowsill and thought about all the years I had mistaken service for love. There was no anger left, only a kind of stunned clarity. The next morning, just before dawn, I locked the door behind me. The hallway smelled faintly of someone else's breakfast. I dragged the suitcase over the tiled floor and listened to the wheels echo against the walls. Outside, London was waking. The street lamps dimmed as if embarrassed by the daylight. A cab waited at the corner. The driver loaded my bag into the trunk without a word. When the car pulled away, I looked back at the building, the window where the tree stood, the faint shimmer of lights that had timed themselves to blink without an audience. The city slid by, gray and gold, and with every turn of the road I felt the distance between who I had been and who I was becoming. By the time we reached the airport, I realized that I wasn't running away. I was simply leaving the door that had always been closed and walking into one that had been waiting for me all along. When the plane landed in Munich for its connection to Vienna, I turned on my phone out of habit. Within seconds, the screen filled with messages. Missed calls from Mum. 10 from Amelia, 4 from Jamie. I didn't open them. Instead, I scrolled to my email and saw the one I had been waiting for. Your booking cancellation has been processed. The words looked small but final, like a verdict quietly stamped by the universe. At the same moment, another notification appeared, an automatic sync alert from iCloud. It asked if I wanted to merge local data with stored backups. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the timestamp. Douglas Trip 2024 backup, the same name I had seen last night, glowing like a bruise in my mind. Curiosity flickered, the dangerous kind that arrives right before clarity. I tapped yes. A folder opened, neat and ordinary at first glance. Then I saw it, a group chat archive named Family Chat No Zara. My chest tightened. I hesitated for only a heartbeat before clicking. The thread loaded slowly, message by message, as if the universe wanted to make sure I felt every syllable. Jamie, we'll leave at 6:30. She sleeps heavy, remember? Amelia, she's the one with all the booking codes. Mum, we'll print them tonight, just delete her copies. Dad, for once, can we have a holiday without her managing everything? Jamie, we'll say it was a mix-up. She'll buy it. She always does. The breath left my lungs all at once. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw flashes, Every late night I'd stayed up organizing their chaos, every apology I'd offered on their behalf, every quiet moment of exhaustion I had mistaken for love. The cruel part wasn't that they had excluded me. It was that they had done it so casually, as if I were a variable in a spreadsheet, easily deleted when the formula needed a cleaner outcome. My eyes skimmed further. A message from my aunt, Aunt Sylvie. She'll forgive you. She can't help it. She's wired that way. Then a reaction emoji, a thumbs up from Jamie. The room tilted. My throat felt dry, my heart too loud. The screen blurred until the words became only shapes of betrayal. For years, I'd laughed when they called me the project manager of the family. They said it like affection, but I understand now it was convenience disguised as gratitude. They needed someone to carry the load so they could travel light. I scrolled to the end. A final message, only a week old. Jamie, let's keep this chat clean. If she finds it, she'll turn it into a PowerPoint about emotional boundaries. And then, beneath it, a laughing emoji from everyone, even my mother. That was the moment something in me detached, not in anger, but in certainty. The kind of certainty that arrives when there's nothing left to save. I looked out the plane window. The clouds below looked soft enough to fall into, endless and indifferent. Somewhere under them, my family was driving through Austria, singing along to the Christmas playlist I had made. For the first time, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be anywhere that needed my silence to stay comfortable. I opened notes and began typing. Words came fast, clean, without apology. This is how it feels to be erased gently, not with cruelty, but with habit. They forgot I existed long before they left me behind. I didn't know if I'd ever use it for anything. But the act of writing felt like reclaiming oxygen. When the plane touched down, my phone buzzed again. Jamie's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it. The person I had once trusted most was now just another number trying to drag me back into a narrative I no longer believed in. I turned the phone face down and walked through the airport. The smell of coffee, the murmur of announcements, the shuffle of strangers, all of it felt like background noise to a movie I wasn't in anymore. At my hotel that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that laughing emoji in the chat, the collective ease of their mockery. I opened my laptop, meaning only to distract myself, but the family chat No Zara folder still sat there, mocking me with its tiny cloud icon. I clicked again, scrolling deeper. Hidden between messages were attachments, photos, documents, the logistical spine of the trip. I recognized every file name. They were the ones I had made. Packing list Douglas, meal plan Snow Chalet, room assignments final. They had copied everything. And then I found something new. Flight plan alternate, PDF. I opened it. It was an itinerary, but not mine, a new one edited just days ago. My name had been deleted from every entry. The column that used to read Zara, room 3 with Amelia now said Graham, Amelia's fiancé, room 3. I let out a slow, disbelieving laugh. Even my space had been replaced. The last page was worse. Notes scribbled at the bottom, keep her out of it this time. She ruins the vibe. I stared at those words until they stopped being English. My hand tightened around the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. It would be easy to call what I felt anger, but it was. It was release, the clean, cold realization that I didn't owe anyone another explanation, apology, or itinerary. I closed the file. For the first time in my life, I didn't care if they missed me. I opened the browser and searched for my next destination, not theirs, not ours, but mine alone. Kyoto Meditation Retreat January enrollment still open. There was one spot left. I booked it. The confirmation email arrived instantly. I stared at the screen and whispered to no one, perfect timing. Before going to sleep, I drafted one more email. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. It was clean and simple. Dear family, I discovered your messages. I understand now. I won't be joining you in Austria or in any other version of the family you curate for photos. The reservations have been canceled, and the refund has been returned to my card. You can keep your peace, I've found mine. Zara. I scheduled it to send at 8 in the morning, the same hour they were supposed to check in at the resort. Then I shut the laptop, lay back on the bed, and watched the snow begin to fall against the window. Each flake disappeared into the dark, but for a moment, every one of them seemed like a tiny light, a quiet declaration that even falling can be graceful when it's your choice. Morning crept in through the blinds, pale and uncertain. I woke to the distant murmur of traffic and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the corridor. My body ached from the weight of dreams I couldn't remember, the kind that leave behind only the residue of emotion, confusion, anger, the faint sting of betrayal. The email I'd scheduled to send had already flown into the digital ether. For a moment, I imagined the scene. my mother's phone buzzing in a quiet hotel lobby, Amelia reading the first lines aloud, the slow dawning on their faces as realization set in. Somewhere between shock and indignation, they would search for someone to blame, not yet understanding that the problem wasn't the message. It was that they had finally lost control of the person who had always cleaned up after them. I opened the curtains. Snow had dusted the streets outside like spilled sugar. People moved briskly, scarves fluttering, their breath visible in the cold air. A woman across the street struggled with a stubborn umbrella, then laughed when it flipped inside out. That laugh, that simple, unguarded sound, cut through me like sunlight. It was the sound of someone still capable of joy. I wanted that again. I sat down at the small desk by the window, opened my laptop, and logged into iCloud one last time. The folder was still there. Family chat no Zara. I told myself I was only opening it for closure, but I think I already knew better. Curiosity has its own gravity. Scrolling to the bottom, I noticed a series of messages I hadn't seen before sent just hours after my cancellation call with the hotel. Jamie, she found out yet? Amelia, no, everything still looks normal. Stop worrying. Mum, Zara's too busy to notice. She'll join later like always. Jamie, good, we just needed a few days without her controlling everything. Dad still feels harsh, but she needs to learn to let go. Amelia, she'll forgive us, she always does. That last line again, she always does, like a refrain in a hymn dedicated to their convenience. And then, buried between reactions and emojis, a new message appeared. A voice note. From Jamie. I clicked play. The audio crackled, the faint sound of wind and laughter in the background, then Jamie's voice, low and uncertain. She'll probably cry, but she'll be fine. Zara doesn't break, she just bends, always bounces back. That's what makes her useful. Useful, not loved, not wanted. Useful. My hands tightened around the edge of the desk until my knuckles ached. I played it again, needing to hear it clearly as if pain could confirm reality. Each repetition scraped another layer of illusion from my memory. The worst part wasn't his tone, it wasn't cruel. It was casual, almost affectionate, as though he were describing a reliable appliance. Something that could take damage and keep working. That was the moment my mind stopped whispering reasons, stopped offering excuses. Every justification I had ever made for them, stress, exhaustion, habit, crumbled. What remained was a cold, perfect truth. They hadn't forgotten me, they had decided I was expendable. I closed the laptop and let the silence settle. It didn't hurt in the same way anymore. The pain had burned through and turned into something clearer, like glass. I felt sharp, fragile, and strangely alive. Around noon, I went downstairs to the cafe beneath the hotel. The place was small, 3 wooden tables, a counter full of pastries, the air warm and dense with the smell of espresso. I ordered a cappuccino and sat near the window, watching the snowfall deepen. For the first time in years, I didn't have an agenda, no checklist, no one waiting for me to fix something. It was terrifying and exhilarating. As I sipped the coffee, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message, but a video call, Jamie. I stared at the name for several seconds before answering. His face appeared, pixelated and nervous. Behind him, the dim lobby of a ski lodge. Zara, he said, voice half whisper, half sigh. Thank God you picked up. I didn't respond. I watched him the way one watches an actor reciting a monologue they've already rehearsed. Listen, he said, Mum, losing it. The resort said the booking's gone. Everyone's freaking out. What happened? I tilted my head slightly, pretending to think. What do you mean? The hotel said the reservation was canceled by you? His voice cracked. Why would you do that? I took another sip of coffee. Maybe because I paid for it. He blinked. You read the messages, didn't you? I did. Jamie's expression shifted, not guilt, not quite shame, but the stunned realization of someone seeing themselves clearly for the first time. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. It was just everyone needed space. You're always in control of everything. We thought, I cut him off gently. You thought I wouldn't notice, you thought I'd forgive you. He didn't answer. Snowflakes drifted down behind the window, melting as they touched the glass. Do you know what's funny? I said. You always used to tell me I was the strong one, the dependable one, but strength doesn't mean letting people step on you quietly. He swallowed hard. Mum's crying, Dad's furious. Can't you at least? No, I said simply. The line went silent for a few seconds. Then he whispered, You sound different. I am? And with that, I ended the call. Back in my room, I packed my bag with calm precision. I moved through the motions like a surgeon, deliberate, exact. Passport, charger, notebook. I caught my reflection in the mirror, same face, same eyes, but something in the posture had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. That night, as my train to Kyoto sliced through the dark, I felt an odd peace settle in my chest. The hum of the tracks beneath my feet sounded almost like a heartbeat, not frantic, but steady. I looked out the window and thought about Jamie's words. She just bends, she always bounces back. He was right about one thing. I did bend. But this time I wasn't bending toward them. This time I was bending toward myself. At dawn, as the train curved through mountains dusted with snow, the first orange light spilled across the horizon. The world outside looked untouched, pure, waiting. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the reflection of my face blur with the passing landscape. A new thought surfaced, quiet, unhurried, undeniable. I am done being useful. I want to be free. The train whistle cut through the morning air, and for the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. Kyoto received me like a breath held and finally released. The air at the station felt cleaner, as if someone had wrung out the noise and left only the essentials. I stepped from the train into a morning that smelled of rain and cedar. People moved with a kind of quiet purpose that made my chest loosen. No one seemed eager to be anywhere else. For the first time in a week, I recognized the sensation of arriving without having to perform it. At a small kiosk, I bought a ticket for the local line and a paper map I did not need but wanted to hold. The lines on the page crisscrossed like delicate threads. I traced a route with my finger and felt the city settle in my palms. Outside, taxis nudged forward, their drivers wearing white gloves as if the day were something formal. I chose to walk. Streets narrowed and widened like the rhythm of a song. Vending machines glowed in doorways like small constellations. I passed a shrine where a woman bowed, pressed her hands together, and closed her eyes. Bells chimed, a soft metal sound that seemed to rinse everything it touched. Somewhere a kettle sang. I felt my shoulders drop the way they do when a hand you trust finds the exact knot and presses. The retreat was hidden at the end of a path that curved between bamboo. I would have missed the gate if not for the paper lantern swaying above it. A sign by the door read simply, "Welcome." Inside, the floorboards were dark and smooth from years of footsteps. A man with kind eyes greeted me with a bow and a smile. He did not ask for a story, only my name. "Zara," I said, and the word sounded new in my mouth. He wrote it on a small card and slid it across to me as if returning a lost item. He showed me a place for my shoes, a basket for my phone, and a wooden peg with my room number burned into it. The retreat rules were written on a single sheet. Silence after dusk. Phones off. Walk slowly. Eat what is given and give thanks. I placed my phone in the basket. The gesture felt ceremonial, like removing an amulet. Before it left my hand, I toggled Do Not Disturb and scheduled one last email, set to send at 8 that morning London time, the exact moment my family would be at the resort desk insisting there was a mistake. It was not a long letter. I wrote only what fit in the mouth without bitterness. I was not forgotten. I was excluded. I am removing myself from the part of this family that needs my silence to keep its peace. I added the cancellation receipt and a single photograph of the itinerary with my handwriting clearly visible, not as proof for them, but as proof for the version of me who still wanted fairness to be recorded. Then I slid the phone into the basket and felt a lightness touch the bones of my wrist. My room was small and clean, a futon folded like a promise. A low window looked out onto a square of garden where moss shone like something underwater. A kettle, a teacup, and a small note printed in a careful hand sat on the tray by the wall. The note said, "Welcome back to yourself." It was a phrase I had read before on postcards, on self-help lists, the kind of sentence that can curdle into slogan if repeated cheaply. Here, it did not feel cheap. It felt like a door. We met in the main hall before noon, 8 of us in a loose circle. The guide wore no shoes and spoke in a voice that never broke the surface of quiet. She explained the rhythm of the days as if describing a gentle machine. Meditation at dawn, walking practice after breakfast, work in the garden, silence after sunset. No need to be good, only be present. She smiled at that. Only, the smallest and the hardest word. We bowed our heads. The room held us. Someone cried soundlessly and then did not. During lunch, I sat at a long table while steam rose from bowls of rice and miso. We ate slowly. No one tried to fill the silence with the clatter of approval. My hands remembered how to move without checking a phone between bites. The first spoonful warmed the back of my throat. I felt something unclench behind my ribs. I did not know I had been holding so much breath until that moment, spoon halfway to mouth, a quiet bowl of soup letting me be simple. After we ate, I walked the garden path. The stones were set unevenly to encourage attention. Leaves clung to damp branches, each drop of water a tiny world. I counted my steps until counting became walking and walking became a kind of listening. The bamboo made its own music when the wind moved through. Somewhere in the main building a bell struck once. The sound landed and spread like a circle on water. I thought of my grandmother's desk at home, the scent of lemon oil and old paper, the way the wood felt when warmed by the sun. I imagined opening the drawer and finding the letters that proved the flat was mine. I had always kept them as if preparing for an argument. Here, standing among green and stone, I realized the stance of readiness was also a posture of fear. I had been living like a soldier in my own house. I had been bracing for impact even in quiet rooms. In the afternoon, we learned how to sit without forcing our bodies to behave. The guide showed us how to let everything fall where it wanted to fall. Knees where they liked, hands cupped lightly, jaw unclenched, tongue resting against the roof of the mouth like a small boat. The simplicity made me want to laugh. The body knows. The mind is the child. We sat. Thoughts came. Little caravans of faces and phrases, old scenes replayed with new lighting, the way my mother had called me darling even as she averted her gaze from the truth of what she was doing. I did not chase any of it. I let the caravan pass. When a truck of anger thundered by, I noticed the tires and not the driver. When an ache arrived asking to be nursed, I gave it a chair and tea. The room glowed with late light and someone's stomach made a brave noise and no one pretended not to hear it. We smiled without looking up. By dusk, the sky had become the color of a bruise healing. Lamps flickered on in the hallways, round paper moons catching our shadows as we moved. We placed our phones back in their basket, proof that we were willing to let a day belong to itself. I looked at the small rectangle with my name tucked under it and felt no itch to reach for it. The world had not ended. The world had simply changed which pair of hands held it. After supper, I walked to the edge of the garden where a low wall separated us from a stand of trees. The ground smelled like rain and stone. I thought of the empty resort desk thousands of miles away, the crisp voice informing my family that the booking had been canceled by the cardholder. I did not picture their faces. I did not rehearse speeches. I let the thought dissolve before it could bloom into theater. This was not revenge. It was a closure designed to fit exactly the size of the wound. Back in my room, I unfolded the futon and slid under the blanket. The fabric was heavier than I expected, like a hand placed gently on a restless shoulder. Outside, night settled into its own quiet order. I turned off the light and listened to the small sounds of the building making sleep. Somewhere, plumbing sighed. A floorboard spoke. In the distance, a train stitched one side of the city to the other with a soft metal thread. Eventually, I rose, pulled my notebook from my bag, and wrote until the ink slowed. Not essays, not explanations. Fragments. The way water writes its name into stone over time. I wrote, "Today I canceled a reservation and a role. Today I did not defend myself to people who prefer me useful to me being whole. Today I sat and my body remembered it belongs to me. When I closed the notebook, I did not feel triumphant. I felt steady. The kind of steadiness I used to admire in other people and pretend I did not crave. I lay back and let my breath smooth out the creases of the day. Just before sleep took me, a small fear tried to re-enter. What if they never call again? What if I have made myself a stranger to my own name? The fear hovered for a moment like a moth near a lamp. Then it drifted away. A larger truth stepped into its place, patient, unadorned. If they never call again, then the people who remain are the ones I was meant to meet. I turned my face to the window. The garden was a soft shape, a darker darkness cut by the pale suggestion of a stone. Somewhere a bell lifted one note to the night. It did not ask anything of me. It simply rang. I woke before dawn, my body already attuned to the rhythm of the temple. The corridor outside my room was quiet except for the soft creak of wood and the rustle of cloth as someone passed with a broom. The air was cool enough to sting when I breathed in, but it felt clean, like forgiveness. When the first bell sounded, I joined the line of people walking barefoot toward the meditation hall. Our steps echoed softly against the boards. No one spoke. The sky outside was still navy blue, the edges of the mountains silvered with early light. We sat facing the garden, each of us a small shadow. The instructor's voice was barely a whisper. "Sit as you are. Let the mind settle. You don't need to fix the silence. It's not broken." I closed my eyes. My thoughts came like insects against glass, restless, insistent. But under them, another sound began to rise, the slow rhythm of my own breath. For months, maybe years, I had confused motion with meaning, believing that being indispensable meant being loved. Now, sitting here doing nothing, I realized how exhausting that had been. The silence in the hall was not empty. It was alive. Every inhale felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself that had been outsourced to other people's comfort. By the time we opened our eyes, dawn had broken fully. Pale gold slid across the tatami mats, turning the air to honey. Someone's stomach growled, and a soft wave of laughter rippled through the group. It was the first shared sound of the morning, fragile and human. After breakfast, rice, pickles, miso soup, tea, we gathered for garden work. My task was to rake the sand into even lines. At first, I tried to make it perfect, symmetrical. Then the instructor passed behind me and said, "Don't control it. Let the rake find its own path." It sounded absurd, but when I stopped forcing it, the lines grew softer, more natural. My hands learned the texture of patience. I thought of every project, every holiday, every family meal I had once micromanaged. I had mistaken control for care. The sun climbed higher, the sand glowed white. Sweat ran down my back. I didn't mind. For the first time, effort didn't feel like obligation. It felt like belonging to myself, not to anyone else's plan. At lunch, one of the guests, an older woman named Marie from France, broke the silence gently. Conversation wasn't encouraged, but sometimes kindness made its own rules. She smiled at me and gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "First time here?" she whispered. I nodded. She leaned closer, voice low. "You have the look of someone who is learning how to stop apologizing." I laughed quietly, caught off guard. "Does it show that much?" She smiled. "Only to those who have done it before." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day. That evening, after meditation, I found myself alone in the small library. The shelves were filled with books in Japanese and English, titles about mindfulness, impermanence, renewal. I pulled out one thin volume bound in blue cloth. A line on the first page caught me and refused to let go. When you release what you were never meant to hold, the world rearranges itself around the space you make. I read it again, slower this time. I thought of my family's group chat, of my mother's voice trying to sound warm while holding secrets, of Jamie's laugh when he said I always forgave. I thought of all the things I had held: duty, guilt, the belief that love must be earned through usefulness. What if, by releasing them, I wasn't losing a family but making space for something better? The idea didn't hurt. It felt like oxygen. The next morning, during walking meditation, the instructor led us through the forest path behind the retreat. The bamboo arched overhead, filtering sunlight into long green shafts. Each step crunched softly on the gravel. Halfway through, she stopped and turned to us. "Notice what wants to stay," she said, "and what is ready to leave." The sentence landed somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't need to ask what it meant. I already knew. Later that day, after lunch, the silence period ended briefly for personal reflection. We were allowed to write letters, not to send, just to speak to the page. I sat by the garden window with my notebook. The ink flowed easily, as if the pen had been waiting for this conversation. "Dear Jamie, you were right, I don't break, but not for the reason you think. I don't bend anymore to make space for everyone else. I bend toward light now. You'll understand one day when you learn that love without respect is only dependency wearing perfume." I stopped, reread the lines, then closed the notebook. I didn't need to send it. The act of writing was enough. On the fourth day, as we shared the evening meal, I noticed something small. No one rushed to clear the dishes, no one hurried to be useful. People moved with ease, trusting that everything would be handled in time. The absence of pressure felt revolutionary. That night, as I lay under the heavy blanket, I thought about my home, the one I had paid for, maintained, repaired, while others treated it as theirs. I pictured the living room, the worn armchair by the window, the stack of unpaid bills that still arrived in my name. A decision began to form, steady and calm. When I returned to London, I wouldn't resume the old choreography. No more quiet funding of everyone's comfort. No more apologetic generosity. I would reclaim not just the house, but the terms of belonging inside it. At dawn on my final day, I packed my suitcase. The sky was pink over the hills. Before leaving, I slipped a note into the offering box near the entrance. It wasn't a prayer, not exactly, just a truth I needed to leave somewhere outside myself. Peace is not a gift someone can give me. It's the silence I choose to keep when the noise of others no longer deserves my answer. When I stepped through the gate, the bamboo swayed and clattered softly in the wind. The air smelled of rain again. The path stretched forward, clean and empty. For the first time, I didn't feel left behind. I felt ahead, walking into a life that no longer needed permission to exist. The airport cafe in Osaka had a window that swallowed the runway whole. I sat with a bowl of soba and watched planes nose along the tarmac like patient animals. My phone lay face down beside the chopsticks, the do not disturb moon shining like a tiny coin in the corner of the screen. I told myself I would not touch it. Peace is a muscle, I thought. You have to let it tire slowly and then grow. I turned the phone over. The lock screen was a row of stacked storms. Mum had called 9 times, Amelia 11, Jamie 6, then 3, then 1, as if urgency could be measured in diminishing courage. A cluster of messages from numbers I had never saved. Cousins, an aunt, even Graham, whose existence I had once accommodated on color-coded seating plans. I did not open anything. I let the shapes of the messages exist without becoming meaning. Then I swiped to the camera and took a picture of the runway, not for them, not to perform serenity, but to remind the future me that this is what the world looks like when you decide to be your own witness. On the train to Kyoto Station, I finally let the notifications unspool. Each preview flashed, then floated upward like a leaflet I chose not to take. Mum, where are you? They say there is no booking. How could you cancel without telling us? Amelia, this is childish. We are freezing. How are you not ashamed? Dad, call your mother. Aunt Sylvie, your behavior is unacceptable. Think of the children. Jamie, Zara, please. The resort itself wrote to me too, unnecessarily polite. Dear MS Douglas, guests under your party name attempted to check in at 0802. As advised, we confirmed the cancellation. We refrained from further explanation per your request. I smiled despite myself. The exactness of 0802 felt like the world stamping a document. At the retreat gate, I surrendered the phone to the basket again. The guide slid it away as if putting a sharp object out of a child's reach. The day flowed forward, and my body remembered very quickly that oxygen can taste sweet when it is not filtered through obligation. That evening, when silence began, I lay on the futon and watched the square of garden through the window. A small light had been left on the far edge of the moss. Moths visited it like an altar. Somewhere across the world, a reception desk stood empty of my name, and my family stood full of indignation. The image did not thrill me. It felt like a room I had already walked out of. Morning brought a pageant of new attempts. While I poured tea in the common room, the phone buzzed so relentlessly in the basket that one of the attendants, a woman with hair like a waterfall, glanced up and then back down with perfect diplomacy. When the permitted hour arrived, I carried the device to a bench under the eaves and scrolled. A photo first. Snow heavy on a wooden sign that read Edelweiss Chalet. Their faces were twisted into caricatures of patience. Jamie made a gesture with one hand, half apology, half plea. Mum clutched her coat as if cold could be negotiated. Below it, the messages multiplied. Mum, you embarrassed us. The receptionist repeated your name over and over. People were looking. Dad, if you had a problem, you should have spoken to your parents, not to strangers. Amelia, we printed all the codes. Do you understand how serious this is? The kids are crying. Graham, there must have been some misunderstanding. Surely this is not how you want to handle conflict. The word conflict made me laugh. It implied 2 sides. I typed and erased 3 replies before writing what wanted to be said. There is no conflict. There is a boundary. I did not send it. Words placed in certain mouths curdle on contact. Instead, I opened my email drafts and reread the message that had gone out at 8. Clean, sparse, true, it asked for nothing. That had been the point. By midday, their fury calcified into reason. The family chat produced practicalities as if discovering them for the first time, alternate hotels, bus timetables, a cousin in Vienna who might have a sofa. I stepped out of the stream. The retreat's bell called us back to breath and bodies, and I followed the sound like a bird follows current. But truth has a way of echoing back until it finds a hollow that will let it sing. Late afternoon, my cousin Ben appeared in my messages. We had not spoken much in years. He was the quiet one who helped at Christmas by drying the dishes and never taking credit for their sparkle. Ben, I'm sorry, not because of the booking, because I watched them plan it. I should have said something. Ben, if you want someone to take out your bins for a month, I volunteer. Ben, also, your email made Mum say wow out loud. That has never happened in our family. I felt a small warmth then, not triumph, not relief, just the recognition of a hand extended without strings. I replied with a thank you that did not try to be noble. Later, while raking the garden sand, I imagined the resort lobby at that exact hour. The quiet shuffle of boots on polished wood. My mother's voice pitched into polite rage. Amelia complaining about the cold as if weather can be shamed. Jamie's hands in his pockets, the rhythm of his heel worrying the floor. And behind the desk, a young woman with a perfect center part and a name badge that did not bend, using the sentence we had agreed upon like a simple tool. I am sorry. The booking was canceled by the cardholder. In the old version of my life, I would have worried about that clerk. I would have imagined her going home tired, telling her flatmate about the difficult English family, wondering if she had said the sentence wrong. I would have carried even that stranger as if my responsibility were infinite. Now I let her be competent. I let her job be only a job. On the third day, the tone of the messages changed again. Anger evaporated. Winter sobered into logistics. Photos arrived of a small pension halfway down the mountain with quilts so brightly patterned the beds looked like folklore. Someone had found a solution that was worse and therefore humbling. The caption read, "We will manage." It was signed with initials like a contract none of them had read. I put the phone away. The hour ended. Silence gathered its edges and tucked us back in. That night, the retreat served sweet potatoes roasted until their edges went to sugar. We ate in the kind of attention that turns ordinary food into ceremony. A man across from me lifted his bowl with 2 hands and closed his eyes before taking a bite. It was not religion. It was respect. After supper, the guide invited those who wished to sit longer. I did. The room darkened one shade at a time. Breath braided itself into something steadier. Thoughts rose and fell like the chest of a sleeping child. Somewhere in the building, a floorboard confessed its age, and we all forgave it. When I returned to my room, I allowed myself 10 minutes with the phone. A compromise with the part of me that still listened for old alarms. The screen bloomed. "Jamie, I am sorry. I know sorry is not enough. We went too far. Jamie, I thought you would be angry in the way you are usually angry. The kind that makes you fix things faster. Jamie, I did not understand this version. The one where you do not fix it. Jamie, please come home, or tell me when you do. I want to talk without the others." I read the messages twice. His words did not absolve him. They did not ask to. They laid down something heavy between us and stepped back to see if it would roll away on its own. It did not. I wrote only this, "I hear you." I did not send that either. Not yet. I am learning to let sentences rest before I make them public. Some turn out to be weather. Some turn out to be climate. The next morning, a message from an unknown number. A photo first, a ring on a countertop beside a crumpled napkin. Then text. "Graham, I ended it with Amelia. This is not your fault. It is ours. The way we made you carry our mess and called it love. I am sorry." I felt the oddest sensation as I read that, as if a tight iron hoop around my chest had been cut cleanly and fallen with a dull sound to the floor. Not because I enjoyed their unraveling. Because someone had finally said the secret out loud. We called dependence love. I closed my eyes and breathed. When I opened them, the garden had shifted into a brighter green. In the afternoon, the instructor led us to a small hill behind the compound. The city lay beyond it like handwriting in a language I was learning to admire without needing to translate. She asked us to stand with our feet hip-width apart and tilt our faces to the sun. "Let the body understand daylight," she said. "It has been carrying night for a long time." I did as she asked. Warmth opened the small flowers of nerves along my cheekbones. In that quiet, I made a decision that had been inching toward me all week, shy and determined. When I returned to London, I would not ask my family to recognize me. I would recognize myself and set the terms. The house is mine. The boundaries are mine. If they wanted a place in that space, they would have to learn the currency of respect. I went back to my room and wrote the least template I would send to my parents. Not a threat. An invitation to adulthood. Line by line, the language appeared: rent at market rate, utilities not included, access hours, notice periods. It was astonishing how quickly the document became less about money and more about honor. On the final line, I wrote a sentence I knew I would keep. A home is not free because love lives there. It is tended because love lives there. The bell called us to supper. I closed the laptop and touched the wooden bracelet at my wrist. My grandmother once told me that every woman in our family is born with a spine like a reed, flexible and strong if planted by water. I had spent years curving mine around other people's weather. Here, beside this small square of garden, I felt it stand and sing. On the last night, as moths returned to their lamp and the city beyond the hill inhaled, I allowed myself one more look at my phone. A single new message waited. From Ben, "At your place next week when you're back. I will bring ginger biscuits and a toolbox. If we are rebuilding, I would like to be useful in a way that does not need applause." I typed a reply, brief and true. Tuesday, 7. I put the phone down, turned off the light, and lay in the dark with a heart that no longer mistook stillness for abandonment. The future did not feel like a story I had to earn. It felt like a room I could walk into with my name on the door. The train hummed along the rails like a low chant, steady and indifferent. I pressed my forehead to the window and watched the hills give way to water, then the water back to city. Kyoto retreated behind me in quiet grace, leaving a stillness that didn't ache. I had come here searching for release, and I was leaving with something subtler, the understanding that silence isn't absence. It's agency. When I landed back in London, the airport's sterile brightness hit like a slap. The air smelled of coffee and metal and hurry. I moved through immigration in a daze, neither tourist nor resident, some third thing returning from a country that existed mostly in the ribs. My phone flickered alive the moment I switched it off airplane mode. A flood of messages hit like static. Jamie again, the last one written just hours ago. Please come home. Mum's worried sick. We need to talk. We'll fix it. The words had weight but no center. They spun like loose wheels. I scrolled without reading the rest. My thumb stopped at a photo, the family table, the one in my flat, the one I had polished and repaired and guarded from water rings. My parents sat at it, faces drawn, Amelia turned sideways, half out of the frame. Beneath it, a caption in Jamie's handwriting, "We're waiting for you." For a moment, the image pierced something soft in me. A reflex, the oldest one stirred, go back, fix it, make the table whole again. But then I remembered Kyoto. The rake gliding through sand that refused to obey symmetry. The instructor's voice, let the rake find its own path. I closed the image. Outside, London was its usual blend of rush and rain. I caught the Piccadilly line to Earl's Court, the same route I'd taken countless times before, but the carriage looked different now. The air was thicker, heavier with the lives of strangers. An old man nodded off against his suitcase. A child hummed to herself, inventing a tune that had never existed. I got off 2 stops early and walked. The streets were wet and glistening under the lamps. The familiar landmarks, the bakery, the newsstand, the corner cafe, looked faintly altered, as if they too had shifted in my absence. When I reached my building, the hallway smelled of polish and dust. A note was taped to my door. "We're inside, please let's talk." "Mum." For a second, I stood frozen. Then I laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that no longer hurts. I unlocked the door. They were all there. Mum rose first, wringing her hands. "Zara, thank God." Her eyes darted to my luggage, then to my face. "We didn't know where you'd gone. You thought I'd chase you," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Amelia sat stiffly on the sofa, legs crossed, arms folded. Jamie stood behind her, looking smaller than I remembered. Dad hovered by the fireplace, his usual air of authority reduced to something like uncertainty. I set my bag down and took off my coat. The silence pressed in, thick as fog. Mum tried again. "We overreacted. It wasn't meant to be cruel, we just needed some quiet." I looked at her, at all of them. "You could have asked." No one spoke. The only sound was the clock ticking above the mantel. Finally, Jamie stepped forward. "Zara, please, I'm sorry, I didn't know how bad it had gotten. You've always been the one holding everything together. You thought that meant I'd never stop," I said. He flinched, but didn't deny it. I walked past them into the kitchen. The table gleamed under the light, cleaner than usual, as if they'd been waiting for this confrontation and thought polish could serve as penance. A stack of unopened letters sat by the sink. Utility bills, council tax, all addressed to me. "This place," I said quietly, "was never yours to invade." Mum frowned. "It's your home too." "It's my home only," I corrected. "Grandma left it to me. I pay for it, I maintain it." "You've been guests, welcome ones, until you decided I wasn't convenient anymore." Dad's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked at the floor. Amelia exhaled sharply. "Zara, you're overreacting. It was one trip. One trip that you all planned behind my back, one that I paid for." I turned to her. "You didn't just forget me, Amelia, you erased me." Her expression faltered, something cracking behind the veneer of defiance. Jamie's voice was soft. "We didn't mean to erase you." "But you did," I said. "And now you'll live with that. The difference is so will I, without apology." I walked to the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a folder. The papers inside were crisp, printed neatly, stacked in order. I handed one to each of them. "What's this?" Dad asked. "An agreement," I said. "If you stay here, you pay rent, market rate. 1 month in advance, utilities separate." Mum blinked, stunned. "Zara, we're your parents." "Yes," I said, "and adults." "Adults who can contribute." No one moved for a moment. The sound of the rain against the window filled the space between us. Jamie nodded slowly. "You're serious." "I'm done mistaking love for unpaid labor," I said. "If you can't accept that, you'll have to find somewhere else to live." Amelia's eyes welled. "You've changed." "Finally," I replied. I went to the window, opened it slightly. The night air rolled in, cold and sharp. Behind me, they were still processing, their words tangled somewhere between protest and recognition. I didn't stay to listen. In my room, the suitcase lay half open on the floor. The The smell of cedar and incense from Kyoto still clung to the clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. For the first time, the quiet of the apartment felt like mine. From the other room, I heard Jamie say, "She's right." His voice was low, careful. Then silence. Later, I stood at the fireplace, the contract folder still on the table. They had gone to bed without resolving anything. That was fine. Not everything needed to be repaired. Some things simply needed to be acknowledged. I took out my notebook, the one from the retreat, and wrote beneath the last entry. Home is not forgiveness. It's the space where I no longer owe anyone my peace. The words sat there, calm and solid. I closed the notebook and set it on the mantel. When I looked up, my reflection shimmered faintly in the window, the same face, the same eyes, but a new stillness behind them. The kind that doesn't need to prove its softness by bleeding. I turned off the lights. In the darkness, the rain softened, the city hummed, and I realized something simple and enormous. I had never lost my family. I had just stopped belonging to their idea of me. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like it hadn't decided whether to forgive the night. I woke before the others. The flat was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of pipes. The kind of silence that usually made me uneasy now felt earned, like something I had paid for in full. I brewed coffee, strong and black, and poured it into the chipped mug my grandmother once used. The smell curled through the kitchen, grounding me. The family was still asleep, their presence a weight in the air rather than a sound. I didn't rush to wake them. I wanted them to step into this day on my terms. The papers from last night were still on the table, the rent agreements neatly stacked. I ran my fingers along the edge of the folder, feeling the small ridges of paper like a heartbeat. Beneath the contracts was another document, the one I hadn't shown yet, my grandmother's will. I took it out and placed it in the center of the table. There was a particular gravity in that single sheet of paper. I had kept it hidden for years, partly out of discretion, partly out of fear that claiming ownership would make me selfish. But I wasn't afraid of that word anymore. Selfishness, I'd learned, is just the courage to have boundaries in a room full of takers. I heard footsteps. Jamie appeared first, hair still damp from a shower, eyes heavy from an uneven night's sleep. He hesitated in the doorway. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He nodded toward the table. "They're still arguing in the other room." "Good," I said, sipping my coffee. "They can get used to what accountability sounds like." He gave a half smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach forgiveness but acknowledges understanding. "You're really not going to back down, are you?" "I can't," I said simply. "If I do, everything goes back to how it was, and I can't live like that again." Jamie leaned against the counter. "You know, I used to think you liked being in charge, that it made you happy." "It didn't," I said. "It made me necessary." And necessity is a leash, not love. Before he could answer, Mum entered, still wearing the same sweater from yesterday, her face lined with sleeplessness. Dad followed, looking smaller somehow, like someone who had lost the script to a role he'd played too long. Amelia trailed behind, phone in hand, scrolling reflexively, a habit of avoidance she probably didn't even notice. "Sit," I said. My tone was even, not an order, not a plea, just a statement of fact. They sat. I placed the document between us. The air tightened. "What's this?" Dad asked cautiously. "The truth," I said. He frowned and picked up the paper. His lips moved silently as he read, eyes darting to the signature at the bottom. Amelia leaned over his shoulder, impatience snapping in her voice. "What are we looking at?" I met her gaze. "Grandma's will. She left this flat to me 6 years ago. I've been paying the taxes ever since. You just never asked whose name was on the deed." Silence spread like a tide. Mum's face went pale. "That can't be right. She said this place would always be for the family." "It is for the family," I said softly, "as long as the family respects the person who keeps it standing." Dad stared at the paper, his jaw working as if chewing through disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't want to make you feel small," I said. "Because I thought love meant protecting everyone from the truth, even when it suffocated me." Jamie's eyes flicked between us. "You've been paying everything?" "Yes," I said. "The mortgage, the maintenance, the taxes, every bill in that pile by the sink. I didn't do it to hold power over you. I did it because I thought if I kept the structure intact, the people inside it would stay kind." No one spoke. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic tick of the clock, patient, indifferent. Amelia broke first. "So what, you're evicting us now?" "No," I said. "I'm offering terms. If you want to stay, you pay rent. If not, I'll help you find a new place. But this home stops being a free refuge today." Mum's voice cracked. "Zara, please, we've been through so much. Can't we just start over?" "We can," I said. "But starting over requires honesty. You all built a world where I existed only as long as I was useful. That version of me doesn't live here anymore. Dad stood, pushing the chair back. You can't treat your parents like tenants. I looked up at him. Then don't behave like ones. The words hung in the air, sharp but steady. He opened his mouth to reply, then thought better of it and sat back down. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jamie reached out, picked up the pen from the folder, and signed the agreement. His handwriting was shaky but deliberate. I'll pay, he said quietly. Not because I have to, but because I should have all along. Mum looked at him, eyes wide. Jamie, he shrugged. It's her house, Mum. It's about time we respected that. The tension cracked like ice. Not gone, but fractured enough for air to pass through. I folded the signed paper and slipped it into the folder. Thank you, I said, my voice softening. That's all I needed, acknowledgement. Amelia stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. I can't do this. That's fine, I said. You don't have to, but if you come back, it'll be as a guest, not a ghost with demands. She left without another word, the front door clicking shut behind her. The sound was not loud, but final. Mum began to cry quietly, her hands twisting the edge of her sweater. Dad stared into his coffee like a man reading his own reflection. I poured another cup and set it gently in front of them. You can stay until you decide, but understand this, peace lives here now. It's expensive, but it's worth every penny. Mum wiped her eyes. You sound like her, she whispered. Who? Your grandmother, she said. The day she made me sign my first lease after I moved back home. I thought she was being cruel, but she said, kindness without respect becomes rot. I smiled faintly. She was right. Jamie chuckled, the sound small but real. I guess the house skipped a generation before finding its backbone again. Dad gave him a look, but even he smiled reluctantly but unmistakably. The tension eased, not resolved, but reshaped into something survivable. Outside, light slipped through the window, hitting the table just right. Dust motes spun like lazy stars. I sat back, folded my hands, and let the moment breathe. The power had shifted, but not with violence. It was quieter than that. It was reclamation, the kind that doesn't need witnesses or applause. Just the steady rhythm of someone finally standing where they were meant to all along. After Amelia left, the apartment seemed to exhale. The air, once thick with unspoken expectations and silent resentments, felt lighter. I moved through the rooms slowly, noticing things I hadn't in years, the curve of the windowsill where the light fell perfectly in the afternoon, the warmth of the radiators I had repaired myself, the faint scent of polish on the floorboards that reminded me of Saturdays spent maintaining the flat while others slept or played. Jamie stayed behind, watching me with an odd mix of admiration and hesitance. You really mean it, don't you? He asked. I do, I replied. This isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries, about understanding that love doesn't exist at the expense of self-respect. He nodded, as if a weight had lifted from him. I never realized, I thought, I just wanted things to go smoothly. I didn't think about how it affected you. You were part of the plan, I said gently, and part of the lesson. But this isn't your fault alone. We all contributed to the story that I had to fix. Now that story ends here. Mum sat in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The tears on her cheeks had dried to faint streaks. I didn't think you'd ever, she trailed off. Ever stand up for myself? I asked, my voice steady. I didn't think I could either for a long time, but you've left me no choice. Dad remained silent, his eyes fixed on the coffee mug in front of him. The authority he wielded for decades felt diminished in the stillness. The room was quiet, not tense, but expectant. I walked to the desk, pulled out the folder, and spread the lease agreements across the surface. Each page crisp, each line clear. This is the new framework, I said. If you want to remain here, you must adhere to it. Market rate rent, utilities separate, no exceptions. Jamie picked up the pen and signed without hesitation. It's the right thing to do, he said softly. Mum's voice trembled. You're so different now, I barely recognize you. I've always been me, I replied. You just never had to see it. You only ever wanted the version that could serve you without complaint. Silence followed, heavy but not oppressive. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the apartment, casting long golden stripes across the floor. I noticed the way it caught the dust motes, spinning them like tiny constellations. After a while, Mum spoke again, her voice quieter this time. I suppose I understand. I just wish I hadn't waited so long to see it. You had the chance, I said. I gave it to you every year, every holiday, every birthday, every dinner, but recognition requires attention, not habit. Dad finally spoke, his tone subdued. We underestimated you. And you paid the price in frustration, guilt, and silent resentment, I replied. Now we have clarity, that's worth more than pretending otherwise. Jamie moved to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a tea towel. I can help, he said. I can do it properly this time. I smiled faintly. That's a start. We went about the afternoon methodically. Jamie tidied, I made coffee, Mum dusted, and Dad quietly moved the furniture. There was no chatter, no attempts to dominate, no expectation that someone else would fix everything. The work was small, ordinary, but it felt monumental in its honesty. As evening fell, I lit the fireplace. The flames danced, warm and untamed. I sat in the armchair I had polished myself, folding my hands in my lap. The crackle of the fire punctuated the quiet. The apartment felt alive in a new way, not because it belonged to me alone, but because I had claimed my place within it. Jamie joined me on the rug, bringing a cup of cocoa. I never thought I'd see this day, he said. Me neither, I admitted. But it was always possible. I just had to stop bending for others first. Mum entered, holding a small box of biscuits. She set them on the table silently. Her face was soft now, tired but honest. I don't know if I can make amends, she said, but I want to try. You don't have to earn your way back, I said. You just have to be present and honest, that's enough. Dad lingered in the doorway, then left without a word. His silence was no longer defiance, it was contemplation. I sipped the cocoa and looked around the room. The apartment had been my battleground, my sanctuary, and now, slowly, it was becoming a home, the first in a long time that felt aligned with my own rhythm. Outside, the city lights glimmered through the window. The night was still, but not oppressive. It held promise, not as a reward, but as a space I had earned through standing up, through saying yes to myself and no to what I could no longer bear. I opened my notebook, the one I had carried from Kyoto, and wrote the first line that felt like a conclusion, yet also a beginning. Peace is not found in forgiveness. It begins when you stop giving your strength to those who never valued it. I closed the notebook and set it on the mantel next to the fireplace. The room glowed in the firelight. Dust motes danced like tiny stars. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time, I felt steady. The family, the apartment, the past, they existed, but they no longer controlled the rhythm of my heartbeat. I realized then that reclaiming my home had been only part of the journey. The larger victory was quiet, subtle, and entirely mine. The discovery that standing up for yourself can create a space where love, respect, and peace coexist, not because they are given, but because you decide to let them. The night deepened. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the fire seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I slept without compromise, without apology, and without fear. The flat, my home, had finally become a mirror of who I was, whole, unbroken, and unapologetically free. Morning came slowly, the light soft and golden across the floorboards. I woke without an alarm, a small luxury I hadn't remembered in years. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee from the night before, of polish, of wood, and quiet. The place no longer felt tense with expectation. Instead, it breathed with me. I dressed simply, jeans, sweater, boots. I wanted no armor, no pretense. I went to the kitchen and set the kettle on, listening to the soft hum as it heated. Jamie moved quietly beside me, drying dishes, arranging utensils with careful hands. It was ordinary work, yet it felt revolutionary. No orders, no hierarchy, just presence. Mum appeared at the doorway, holding a small stack of folded laundry. I thought I'd help, she said softly. Her eyes met mine, open and honest. There was no pretense of guilt, only acknowledgement. You're learning, I said, more to the room than to her. It's not about grand gestures, it's about showing up where you belong, she nodded. I'll try, I want to try. Dad lingered near the window, his posture awkward at first. Then he began to move through the apartment, tidying, dusting, adjusting pictures on the walls. I watched silently. He didn't speak much, but his hands moved with intention. Actions can be louder than words, I thought. Jamie spoke from the counter. I never realized how much I relied on you without noticing. I want to do things differently now. That's enough, I said. No one earns permission, you just act with respect. We worked together through the morning. The apartment seemed to expand with each deliberate movement, dishes cleaned, windows opened, surfaces dusted, floors polished. The quiet was not oppressive. It was restorative. By mid-afternoon, I opened the small desk drawer that held my grandmother's old notebooks and letters. I pulled one out and traced the worn edges with my fingers. Each line of ink, each careful script, spoke of the women who had come before me, who had endured, organized, and claimed their own spaces. Their strength was subtle, threaded into every object, every room. I felt it settle in my chest. Jamie joined me, curious. Do you ever wonder if they will understand? I smiled faintly. They will understand only if they decide to see clearly. I can't teach them that. The next few days passed in a rhythm that felt new. I arranged the living room to my liking, chairs angled just so, light flowing through the windows at certain hours, plants placed where they could thrive without interference. Each adjustment was deliberate, a dialogue with the space that now belonged fully to me. Jamie helped with small repairs, tightening a loose handle, fixing a squeaky hinge. He worked without being asked, without expectation. His presence was steady, supportive, a reflection of respect earned rather than demanded. Mum cooked dinner one evening, offering the food silently, letting it speak for her attention. I tasted it, nodded, and thanked her. Gratitude was no longer a transaction. It was acknowledgement. Dad moved through the apartment with quiet deliberation, arranging books on the shelves he had once ignored. Occasionally, he looked at me and gave a small nod, a silent affirmation of recognition. I began to write again, not letters but reflections, pages filled with observations about home, respect, boundaries, and self. Each entry was a thread weaving me back into myself, connecting the past, the present, and the future. Late afternoon, I opened the window and breathed in the city. The noise of London was no longer intrusion but accompaniment. Life carried on outside, indifferent, but I was rooted inside. The apartment had become a sanctuary not because of its walls, but because of the space I claimed within it. Jamie spoke from the hallway. "Do you think they'll change?" "I don't know," I replied. "I hope, but I don't depend on it anymore. My space, my peace, my rules." Mum appeared again, this time holding a small photo album. "I found these. I thought maybe we could look together." I took it from her, flipping slowly through the pages. Memories of holidays past, smiles, and laughter captured in stillness. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt the weight of clarity that love and respect are not always aligned, and that boundaries are not walls but the framework for real connection. The evening sun slanted through the window, gilding the furniture, the books, the small objects I had arranged with care. The apartment glowed, alive in its quiet dignity. I stood at the window, looking out over the street, thinking about what I had gained. Not revenge, not triumph, but sovereignty over my own life. Jamie placed a cup of tea beside me. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. "Yes," I whispered. "So am I," the city hummed outside. Inside, the apartment pulsed with the subtle rhythm of reclaimed space, respect, and careful, intentional presence. For the first time in years, I felt entirely, unmistakably home. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds in soft stripes across the floor. I woke to the hum of the city, a familiar pulse that no longer felt intrusive. The apartment had settled into itself, and I moved through it like a visitor finally allowed to claim the place as my own. Jamie was already awake, quietly arranging books on the shelf in the study. Each one he touched seemed to land with care, deliberate and unhurried. He looked up and smiled. "I never realized how much order you kept here," he said softly. "I didn't do it for show," I replied. "I did it because I had to," he nodded. "I see that now. I'll help however I can. No expectations." Mum appeared in the kitchen, carrying a basket of laundry. She set it down quietly, no words, just presence. I recognized the gesture, a silent apology or perhaps recognition. Either way, it was enough. Dad lingered by the window, adjusting the blinds. His movements were careful, contemplative, a stark contrast to the ease of dominance he had carried before. He glanced at me and gave a subtle nod, an acknowledgement that went beyond words. Breakfast passed in near silence, punctuated only by the small clatter of utensils and the hum of conversation that was careful not to impose. We were together, but not trapped in the familiar hierarchy of expectation. Each of us was responsible for our presence, our choices. Later, I moved through the rooms, arranging furniture and small objects the way I wanted them. Each adjustment was a negotiation between function and beauty, comfort and intention. I placed a small plant near the window to catch the morning light, moved a chair so it faced the fireplace at just the right angle, and arranged the cushions on the sofa with deliberate care. Each small action felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had long overlooked. Jamie joined me, carrying a toolbox. "I noticed the hinge on the bedroom door squeaks," he said. "Want me to fix it?" "Yes," I replied, "and thank you for noticing." He worked with quiet precision, and I realized that he had begun to understand the balance of respect and responsibility. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it shifted the energy in the apartment. Mum returned later, carrying a small photo album she had found. "I thought we could look together," she said softly. I took the album from her, flipping through pages of past holidays, birthdays, and ordinary moments. Memories that had once been tainted by resentment and obligation now felt lighter, viewed through the lens of clarity. I didn't feel anger or sorrow. I felt the weight of acknowledgement, the recognition that love and respect are not always synonymous, and that boundaries are necessary to preserve both. By evening, the apartment hummed with quiet life. Jamie had moved the furniture in the living room slightly to catch the fading sunlight. Mum placed a small vase of flowers on the table, their colors muted but rich. Dad adjusted the curtains so that the light fell across the room in a soft glow. I stood at the window, looking out over the street, feeling the rhythm of the city beneath me. This was my space. I had earned it not through confrontation or punishment, but through the assertion of boundaries and the reclamation of my own presence. Jamie came to stand beside me, holding a cup of tea. "It's peaceful," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "So am I." The light faded gradually, leaving the apartment in a soft dusk glow. The warmth from the fireplace and the subtle hum of our shared presence made the rooms feel alive in a way they never had before. For the first time in years, I was not just surviving the household, not merely mediating and managing. I was inhabiting it fully, on my own terms. I sat by the fire with my notebook in hand, writing down reflections from the retreat and the past days. Each line recorded a shift, a reclamation of thought and space. Home is not where you bend for others. Home is where you stand as yourself. Love cannot thrive without respect. Peace cannot exist without boundaries. I closed the notebook and placed it on the mantel. The apartment glowed in the firelight, steady and alive. Outside, London carried on in its usual rhythm, but inside, everything felt aligned. The family, the home, the past, they existed, but they no longer dictated the pace of my life. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth flow through me. I felt anchored, grounded, and for the first time, completely at ease. The reconstruction was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, a reclamation of identity that had been deferred for decades. And in that quiet dusk, I realized something profound. Reclaiming space, whether physical, emotional, or mental, is the foundation for a life lived fully and freely. The night deepened, the apartment pulsed with life and stillness intertwined. I leaned back, eyes closed, breathing slowly. The journey was not over, but the first major chapter had concluded. I had rebuilt, I had reclaimed, and I had finally begun to belong to myself. Morning arrived soft and golden, washing the apartment in a light that felt like permission. I woke before anyone else, stretched, and felt the quiet hum of the city beneath the windows. The apartment no longer carried tension, resentment, or expectation. It had become a home in the truest sense, a space that reflected who I had become rather than who others wanted me to be. I brewed coffee and carried it to the living room. Jamie had left the kitchen tidy, Mum had arranged a small bouquet of flowers on the table, and Dad had adjusted the curtains so that the morning light fell evenly across the room. I paused, noticing the subtle care they had taken, not out of obligation, but from the beginnings of respect. The city pulsed outside, unaware of the transformation within. I sipped my coffee slowly, allowing myself to observe without judgment, without expectation. This was a new rhythm, a pace of life I had longed for, yet hadn't realized was possible. Jamie joined me on the sofa, carrying a cup of tea. "It's peaceful," he said, as though he were discovering the word for the first time. "Yes," I replied. "So am I," he smiled faintly, a mixture of admiration and relief. "I think we're finally doing it right." Mum appeared beside us, her face softer than it had been in years. She didn't speak at first, only set down a small tray of biscuits. Then she sat, hesitating, and finally said, "Zara, I see now. You've taught us without even trying. Maybe it took this long for us to notice." I took a biscuit, turned it over in my hand, and nodded. "It's not a lesson in authority, it's a lesson in presence. You only understand it when you experience it." The morning unfolded slowly. We moved through small tasks together, clearing the table, adjusting furniture, watering the plants. There was no hurry, no hierarchy, only the deliberate rhythm of people inhabiting a space with respect. I pulled out my notebook from the Kyoto retreat and wrote down the reflections that had crystallized in the past weeks. Each line was an affirmation, a declaration of autonomy. Home is not given, it is claimed. Peace is not found, it is chosen. Love is not conditional, it is mutual. Respect is not demanded, it is recognized. Jamie leaned over to read. "You've really changed," he said softly. "I've always been me," I said. "You just didn't see it until now." Mum sighed, a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "I hope I can learn to respect that, to see you fully." "You can start," I said gently. "The rest is up to time and intention." By afternoon, sunlight poured through the windows and the apartment glowed with warmth. The city beyond carried on with its usual rhythm, but inside the space hummed with the quiet confidence of reclaimed presence. I felt rooted, centered, and unshakable. Jamie moved to the windowsill and straightened a small potted plant. "It's beautiful," he said. "Not just the apartment, everything. You," I smiled faintly. "It's not about me. It's about what we've built together, finally, without pretense." The evening arrived and I lit the fireplace. Flames danced across the room, casting moving shadows that made the apartment feel alive. I leaned back in the armchair, watching the glow. The papers on the desk, the contracts, the inheritance documents, the lease all had found their place. They were no longer instruments of control, but markers of clarity and boundaries. Mum and Dad sat nearby, quiet and attentive. Jamie had his notebook open, jotting down small plans for the apartment's upkeep. No one spoke unnecessarily. The room was full of respect, acknowledgement, and a delicate harmony that had taken years to cultivate. I closed my eyes and breathed in the warmth, feeling the transformation settle into my bones. The journey of reclaiming my home had mirrored the reclamation of my life. Boundaries had been drawn, respect had been earned, and the family had begun to understand the balance between love and autonomy. Outside, the city lights shimmered, indifferent yet beautiful. Inside, the apartment pulsed with the quiet rhythm of life reclaimed and freedom embraced. I sipped my tea, feeling fully present, fully home, and fully myself. The night deepened. I rose and looked around one last time before bed, noticing each object, each corner, each carefully arranged space. Everything was aligned with the life I had chosen. Peace, I realized, was not a gift. It was a space you created and refused to compromise. I turned off the light. The apartment glowed faintly in the embers of the fire. I lay down, letting the warmth seep into my bones. For the first time, I slept entirely on my own terms, without apology, without fear, and without compromise. The new light, quiet, steady, and unwavering, belonged to me. The following morning, I woke to a world that seemed smaller and larger at the same time. The apartment no longer carried the weight of expectation. Every object, every corner, seemed to exist on its own terms, reflecting the new rhythm I had set. I stretched and felt the tension that had accumulated over years slowly unwind from my spine. I moved through the rooms, taking note of small changes I wanted. A plant shifted to catch the morning light, a chair angled toward the fireplace, the cushions fluffed and positioned just so. Each adjustment was deliberate, affirming that this space finally responded to me, not to anyone else. Jamie emerged from the kitchen carrying a cup of tea. He hesitated, then placed it beside mine on the coffee table. "It feels different here," he said softly, "like the apartment is breathing." "Yes," I said, accepting the tea. "It is, and it will continue to breathe as long as I respect it and expect the same from others." Mum joined us next, quiet, holding a tray of cookies she had baked. She didn't speak at first, simply arranging them on the table. Then she said softly, "I didn't realize how much I'd relied on your presence without seeing what it cost you." I nodded. "Awareness is the first step. Acknowledgement is the second. The rest comes through action." Jamie smiled faintly. "I think we're learning." We spent the morning methodically, tidying, arranging, moving through small chores with care. Each person participated in their own way, not out of obligation but choice. I watched Mum adjust a photo frame, Jamie straighten the books on the shelf, Dad sweeping the floorboards with slow, precise strokes. Even in silence, respect pulsed through the apartment. During a break, I took out my notebook from Kyoto and wrote. Each line was deliberate, recording the transformation within me. "This space is mine. My choices shape it. Peace is not found in compliance, but in intention. Boundaries are not walls. They are the scaffolding for respect and love." Mum glanced at the notebook and whispered, "I see now. I think I understand what it means to honor you." I smiled. Recognition is not obligation, it's presence. The afternoon unfolded with quiet harmony. Light streamed through the windows, casting soft patterns on the floor. The apartment glowed, alive in its own right. I moved to the fireplace and stacked wood for the evening. Jamie joined me, lifting one piece at a time, working without direction, only cooperation. By evening, we were all gathered in the living room. The fire crackled and the apartment hummed with a soft rhythm of reclaimed life. Mum and Dad sat together, quiet but present. Jamie sprawled on the rug with a book, glancing up occasionally. I sipped my tea, feeling the steady warmth spread through me. I opened my notebook again and wrote one final line. "Home is not given, it is claimed. Peace is chosen. Love and respect exist together only when boundaries are honored. I belong to myself first." I closed the notebook and placed it on the mantel, near the dancing flames. The apartment, the family, the past, all existed, but none dictated the pace of my heartbeat. I realized that the work of reclaiming space, physical, emotional, and mental, was complete, and with it, a freedom I had longed for my entire life. Outside, the city lights shimmered softly, indifferent yet beautiful. Inside, the apartment glowed steadily, pulsing with the quiet rhythm of life fully reclaimed. I lay back, letting the warmth seep into my bones. The journey had been long, but it had led to this: a home that reflected my choices, a family that began to respect them, and a self finally at ease. For the first time, I slept knowing that my peace was my own, unclaimed by expectation, unshaken by obligation, and fully illuminated by the new light I had chosen to embrace.